so many things are possible. My best guess is that Jeffrey Goldberg, like Mike Waltz, is a neocon. They share a similar agenda. So it's perfectly plausible to me that they had each other's numbers because they share the same agenda in Washington, and they've both been around for a while.
So Aaron Maté recently went on Judging Freedom, that's Andrew Napolitano's podcast, and shared his thoughts on the additional information that's been released regarding the signal leak related to the Yemen strike that happened a few weeks ago. And Aaron's one of the best independent journalists in the world, so I can't wait to hear him opine on as to whether he considers Mike Waltz's explanation for all this happening plausible or not. So let's watch and let's react.
How did it come about, in your view? What is the significance of Jeffrey Goldberg having been on that chat?
It's a great question, and the person who needs to answer it and has not provided a sufficient answer so far is Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, who added Jeffrey Goldberg to the chat and has so far come up with what I have to call a moronic explanation that somehow Jeffrey Goldberg's number was added to his phone, was somehow sucked in. That's what he told Fox News, and that the person who he thought Jeffrey Goldberg wasn't in his contacts properly. It doesn't make any sense. So that's for Mike Waltz to answer, and hopefully there'll be more accountability there. But listen, on the point about Jeffrey Goldberg and who he is and his background, this to me is such a catastrophic screw up by the Trump administration that I have to rarely find myself defending Jeffrey Goldberg, whose views otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, this is not Sean Hannity, right?
No, Jeffrey Goldberg is someone who the Trump administration has pointed out has been a fraudster, and he is. He took part in the Iraq WMD fraud. He put out propaganda on behalf of Dick Cheney to help justify the invasion of Iraq and the lead up to it. He has been a lifelong advocate of the Israeli occupation and apartheid. He served as an IDF prison guard. He was a Russiagate fraudster. So there's a long rap sheet that you can criticize him for. But in this case, this was not his fault. It was Mike Waltz's fault. And in the process, we got an extraordinary window into planning an act of aggression against Yemen. And my only complaint here about the response so far is that there's been way too much focus on the, protocol mistakes in terms of safeguarding what I think is classified information, and not enough scrutiny on the actual act they were discussing, which is bombing Yemen and killing civilians in the process.
Right.
Absolutely right. That's the story that's being lost in all this, and especially Trump's hypocrisy on it, because just last year he was on the Tim Pool show condemning Biden for bombing Yemen, and now he's doing the same thing. Aaron's totally right about Jeffrey Goldberg. He is a hack. He is a neocon hack, and he shares a foreign policy agenda with Mike Waltz. I don't consider Mike Waltz's explanation plausible. They knew each other because they shared that agenda, at least that single issue coalition they agreed upon. They clearly had some previous contact. This was not a mistake, and Mike Waltz's explanation on this is honestly ludicrous, and nothing is worse for the Trump administration than for Jeffrey Goldberg to be able to look good in a situation. But it seems like what he released is accurate here.
Right. No scrutiny about the lawfulness, wisdom, morality. They lose on all three counts, in my view, and probably in yours, of bombing these people. None whatsoever. The only scrutiny seems to be, was Hegseth telling the truth when he said the plans weren't posted? Well, we know that they were posted. Were Gabbard and Ratcliffe telling the truth when they said we don't remember seeing military plans? I don't know how they could possibly not remember that.
And the text that your producer Chris is showing on screen are so important, because this is where Mike Waltz is so excited that they've hit the first target. He's sort of giving a play-by-play. And what are they talking about? They're talking about bombing a civilian building where their target, presumably a member of the Houthis, Ansar Allah, was visiting his girlfriend. And Mike Waltz says, we had a positive ID of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and it's now collapsed. So he's bragging about, and in fact, he was so excited to type it out that he screwed up his initial message because he was so excited. They're bragging about destroying a civilian building and killing civilians in the process. And J.D. Vance, who was the lone voice of dissent earlier in that text thread in terms of the decision to bomb Yemen, he responds with excellent. And
Yeah.
JD Vance's dissent is really instructive, because what's so funny about this is not even JD Vance, who is the only voice here to say, you know, this is not a good idea. He can't even bring himself to acknowledge why they're bombing Yemen in the first place. JD Vance, in advocating against the bombing, you know what he says? He says, we're doing this on behalf of Europe, and I don't want to bail them out. This bombing of Yemen had nothing to do with Europe. The only connection to Europe is that it was carried out on behalf of a European settler colony called Israel. But JD Vance can't even bring himself to acknowledge that that's why they're doing it. So to be able to even put forward a voice of dissent, he has to mischaracterize the whole reason for the military action that he's bombing, because you simply cannot criticize something that's done in the name of Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. This was totally on behalf of Israel. And, you know, even Trump admitted in his Truth Social post that this was to send a message to Iran. And that's exactly what Israel wants to do. So they're dancing around the fact that this was done on behalf of Israel. Now, I think Aaron is actually being a little bit too charitable on these people. These people are war criminals. There's no authority under the Constitution to launch unilateral strikes against Yemen. And that's not just an indictment against Trump. It's an indictment against Biden and Bush and Clinton and all the presidents before him that resorted to that. They can cite the War Powers Act all they want, but the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and only laws that are consistent with that, according to Article 6, Section 2, are to be considered the supreme law of the land. The War Powers Act is not. Only Congress can declare war and to get into war situations. So these people are vile war criminals, especially Mike Waltz. At least JD Vance initially had the morality to oppose this thing, but you see even here in this text message, he's essentially celebrating it when you know civilians have died. When this guy goes into his girlfriend's building and that building is collapsed, civilians have died over this. So this is a moral beyond being America last and Israel first.
And they're doing this for Israel because Ansar Allah, the Houthis, were interfering with Israeli ships as an act of protest against Israel's breaking of the ceasefire by blocking all humanitarian aid and food into Gaza.
Chris, put up the 360-degree video of Pepe Escobar, if we can get that. This is the residential neighborhood in which the bomb hit. You'll see Pepe in just a minute. There he is, standing where this apartment building once stood. We interviewed Pepe live. Now his camera person moves around. We interviewed Pepe live on Monday. This attack was sometime prior to that. But you can see it's not a military area. It's a residential neighborhood. At the time we interviewed that, we didn't know, and I guess we still don't know. Mike Waltz is assuming they know that this person they were trying to kill was in fact in the building. I could be snarky and say, gee, did I miss something? Did Congress declare war on Yemen? We know it didn't, and we know presidents don't even wait for declarations of war any longer. I am not a stickler for prosecuting people, as you can imagine, but espionage is defined as failing to keep safe national defense secrets, and plans to bomb, to kill human beings by the military in another country are secret, whether they're characterized as classified or not. There are two espionage statutes that the Republicans wanted Hillary Clinton to be prosecuted under. One is the intentional misplacement of national security secrets. The other is the negligent misplacement of national security secrets. Question, do you think Kash Patel is going to, and Pam Bondi are going to get an indictment of Pete Hegseth?
Well, the indication so far is that there will be no accountability whatsoever. They're making the laughable claim that this was not classified information. They really want to argue that talking about bombing before it happens, talking about targets, talking about weapon systems, the type of aircraft and drones that are being used, they really want to argue that that's not classified. I just think that's laughable. If it
Yeah, imagine taking that position on this, that this, a war planning endeavor between the highest brass in the government. This is not just lower level officials. This is the VP, the National Security Advisor, etc. are planning a military strike. They're saying that that's not classified, but everything related to the Epstein files is classified and cannot be released. Just imagine that. The utter hypocrisy behind this is absolutely mad. This is a pivot to try to cover up for what is truly an embarrassing situation that was not deliberately done. I'm sorry, Trump fans. This was not 4D chess. This is embarrassing for Waltz, and there's no plausible scenario in which Waltz does this intentionally. It just makes everyone look terrible, especially him and Hegseth.
Democrat had been in a similar situation. There's no way they'd be saying that, oh, this is nothing to worry about. So yeah, this is a case where they're caught with their pants down, and so far no accountability for anyone. But I think someone will have, this is such a embarrassment that there will have to be something here. Someone will have to issue up a apology at minimum, or maybe even resign. And I think, again, this comes down to Mike Waltz. It was him who added Jeffrey Goldberg to that chat and cannot come up with an explanation for how that happened.
Do you buy the story of the phone being sucked into his phone? I never heard of that, by the way, but I'm not a technical person.
No one's heard of that.
No, I do not.
Think they were trying to add somebody else and they mistyped to the number, or do you think they were trying to add Goldberg because he carried water for Dick Cheney when he preached the same neocon nonsense that we know that Pete Hegseth and Mike Waltz adhere to?
This is all speculation, but my best guess, and again, so many things are possible. My best guess is that Jeffrey Goldberg, like Mike Waltz, is a neocon. They share a similar agenda. So it's perfectly plausible to me that they had each other's numbers because they share the same agenda in Washington, and they've both been around for a while. And that Mike Waltz accidentally typed in Jeffrey Goldberg when he meant to type in someone else with the same initials or similar initials. That's my best guess.
For sure. No other explanation makes sense. They had previous contact and, at least a familiarity with each other. There's no other way that this can happen. And any kind of, randomization effect just wouldn't happen. I use Signal too. We've talked about Signal the last few days in various videos, but you don't just get random people's contacts in your Signal that are available to invite to chats unless you just type in their phone number. You could do that. You can add someone to a chat via phone number, but this makes no sense. Mike Waltz is dancing here. He has to try to make an excuse, but he had a contact with this guy that routinely pushed Russiagate propaganda, pro-war propaganda, WMD's propaganda, etc., and he just doesn't want to admit that.
Here's, I think this is Mike Waltz. Just bear with me a minute. Yeah, here's Mike Waltz. Well, it's a waltz. You tell me if he really accepts responsibility. Cut number 23.
So your staffer did not put his contact information. But how did it end up in your phone?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, but that's a pretty big problem.
That's what we've got the best technical minds, right?
That's disturbing.
And that's where, I'm sure everybody out there has had a contact where it was said one person and then a different phone number.
But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious. How's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then somehow it gets
someone
sucked
sent
in,
you that
it gets
contact.
sucked in.
Was there someone else supposed to be on the chat that wasn't on the chat that you thought was?
So
on
the
chat?
person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
Who
guy.
was that? What person?
Well, I'm not. Look, okay. Laura, I take responsibility. I built the group.
Okay.
So.
Does that illuminate things at all?
No, it doesn't. It just makes it more confusing. The only way that possibly makes sense is if there's another Jeffrey Goldberg who is in a national security position with access to something so sensitive as planning a bombing of Yemen, and that's who he meant to add. It's the only possible explanation. Otherwise, this just makes no sense.
Yeah, the whole thing doesn't make sense. Mike Waltz cannot be trusted on this. He is a neocon, and this whole episode really reveals the extent to which the neocons still hold power within the Trump administration. And this doesn't even tell the whole story, because Elise Stefanik is in the administration, huge neocon. Marco Rubio is in the administration, big neocon. He's kind of been acting more like a Trumpian in terms of carrying out Trump's agenda so far, but certainly a neocon past there. Mike Huckabee is, going through, I think, his hearing process right now, but total neocon. So neocons infest this administration, despite the fact that Trump campaigned against the neocons, specifically Liz Cheney and Jeb Bush and George Bush when he ran in his first term. But it's just really horrifying the extent to which these neocons continue to have continuous power regardless of who the American people elect. It's almost like a mirage. Our electoral process, no matter who you vote for, my friend Tom Woods always says, you get John McCain, no matter who you vote for. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that with escalating a theater of war and restoring aid to Ukraine. That's not something that would have been an America First principle that Trump talked about on the campaign trail. So this situation is crazy. There's been more text released today that sheds more light on this. And again, I'm sorry, these people killed innocent civilians over this ordeal on behalf of Israel. This is America last through and through. But I do want to hear what you guys have to say about it. Let me know in the comments below. Do you believe Mike Waltz's explanation for this, or do you think Aaron Maté is right and this doesn't make any sense whatsoever? I want to hear from you. And until I talk to you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Take care, guys. Peace out. I'll see you in the next one.